How's it going, everybody? This is Radishhead, and welcome back to another episode of Upland Analysis. Today I'm going to be talking about another topic which is very interesting and also quite analytical. And you can use this on two different levels. If you don't have too much UPX to spend, the advice that I'm going to give you today is a really good way to pick out neighbourhoods to buy in which have a lot of potential to pop in value in the future. And if you are a player with quite a lot of UPX to spend, this method which I've identified is a really good way to identify neighbourhoods where you could buy up quite a lot of properties and see an instant return on the value of those properties once you've bought them, because the floor price in that neighbourhood will rise very quickly. What am I talking about? Well, let me load up this website here, up2-datahub.com. I've spoken about it on the channel before. I'm going to have a link for it in the comments. And the first thing that you've got to do in order to identify a neighbourhood that you think could go up in value very quickly is to identify the city that you want to be investing in. Now for me, if I'm doing this strategy, I want a city that has a reasonably low entry price, because I don't want to be investing too much to get my returns. And I also want a city that's got quite a lot of liquidity, because once I buy up this neighbourhood, I actually want there to be people to sell it to afterwards. So by combining those two factors, I've decided that Chicago is going to be my place to be. So I'm going to click on Chicago, and it's going to pop up here with all of the data. And all I'm going to do is click this button here where it says download property list. Now I've opened the file up. I've saved it as market making, so I like to call this strategy market making, because if you have enough UPX, and in some cases you don't even need that much, you can influence the price for an entire neighbourhood. All you've got to do is find the right neighbourhood at the right price, and that is what this video is all about. So I've just pasted all of the data in here. Once you picked your city and downloaded the city data, is to pick the neighbourhood. Now I've got a tab here. This is how I pick a neighbourhood that I like to identify as a potential for bumping up the floor price with as little resource as possible. So on this column here, I've got a list of the neighbourhoods from the raw data. I've got the minimum UPX price, also known as the floor price. I'm only looking at UPX, I'm not caring about dollars. If the UPX floor rises, the dollar floor rises. And also the number of properties. Now when picking a neighbourhood for this strategy, and to remind you, this strategy is to buy properties, or one or multiple properties at the floor price depending on your budget, and seeing that floor price rise by as much as possible. Well, it makes sense that in that situation you want there to be as few properties on the market as possible, and for those properties to be as cheap as possible. Those two things combined is the absolute sweet spot. So I've put in a very rough formula here which multiplies the minimum UPX price by the number of properties. And that's enough information to identify the best candidates for this market making strategy. So I've put a ranking system in here. The lower the number, the better. So I just had a scroll through, and the top 3 in Chicago right now for my market making strategy, where I believe that your purchases will have the biggest impact on the floor price, is Riverdale, Avalon Park, and Fuller Park. Those are the top 3. So what I've done here is that I've created a separate worksheet on my Excel document for each of these 3. And let's start with Riverdale. So I've taken the same data, but this time I filtered it on the Riverdale neighbourhood. And this is every property that's for sale in Riverdale right now by the cheapest floor price going up. And you'll see immediately that I did quite a good job picking this one with my formula, because you can already see that if you just buy like 10 properties, the floor price is already being bumped up by 1,000, which is actually quite a big bump considering how few properties that is. If you buy 20 properties, wow, the floor is bumped up by like 6-7k. So Yeah, some of these neighborhoods are absolutely primed to explode with just a few purchases, and I've made quite a lot of upicks with this strategy in the past. I'm letting you in on the secret now. So that's the data which I've input, and these 4 columns here are the calculations which I use to determine whether it's worthwhile buying in one of my market maker neighborhoods. So first of all, the cumulative cost. If I was buying all of these properties from the cheapest going up, how much would the total cost be? So the first one is 15,000 upix because it's 14,500 plus the 5% tax. The second one is 30,700 upix because again you're buying the first property, the second property, and you're paying tax on both of those, and so on. So this column here is the total amount of upix that you're paying in order to own properties in that neighborhood. The next column, portfolio value, is the forecast value of the properties that you've been buying as part of this strategy, taking into account the new floor following you buying the properties. So obviously, when you buy the first property, your value is suddenly 14,750 because you've bought the one at 14,500, and then the new floor is 14,750. So that's your new forecast value, and it kind of goes up from there. So by the time you get to this property here, your portfolio value is 60,000 because you own 4 properties, and the floor is now 15,000. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. Next is the profit. So taking into account the tax when you're buying it, we got the cost that you spent on the properties, the amount that your portfolio is worth. Is it worth it? Are you actually making a profit on this in upix? And then also, what percentage profit are you making as a percentage of your investment? So we can see that if we were using Riverdale as an example, if we were buying the first 10 properties, we're not making a massive loss, but we're not actually making a profit because we have to pay tax on all of these properties that we're buying, and it's just not quite pushing the floor up enough to make that difference. However, if we buy just 5 more properties, because the floor starts to ramp up quite quickly after 10 properties, it goes from 15,500 to 17,500 to 18 to 19,000 upix. Suddenly, if you're buying 15 properties, your profit is 15%, or 37,000 upix on an investment of 247,000. That's a pretty good return. Just one more property, and suddenly you've got 50k on a 260k investment. You don't get opportunities like that in Upland very often, and I am telling you that some of the biggest players in the game, they absolutely use analysis techniques like this to identify areas where their money will have the most impact. Let me just show off another one of these just for an example. Let's have a look at Avalon Park, because I think this one has even more potential than Riverdale. So just by buying 2 properties in Avalon Park, you're buying 2 properties for 25,000. Oh wow, look, the floor's now 30,000. You've just made a 14% profit in terms of the floor price. Now, I'm well aware that obviously you actually have to sell the property afterward in order to make that money back. But if you are the cheapest in the city, there's a good chance that you'll be able to sell it eventually. And the strategy that I'm using here means you're picking the neighborhoods with the fewest properties on sale. Look at this one, Avalon Park, it's only got 66 on sale, and the floor starts at 25k. Like, to me, that just seems like a really good deal. And the percentage returns, they sort of speak for themselves, really. It jumps up to 28. If you just buy these first 4 properties, you've spent 119,000, and my calculator thinks that you've made an extra 33,000 on top of that. So, yeah, it's fairly risky playing as a whale and doing something like this, but it's less risky if you're just a player. You've got like 100,000 or 200,000 upix to spend, and obviously you're saving some money for minting new cities like LA, but You want to know where your money could have the most value in existing cities. You want to invest in Chicago and you don't know where to invest. Well, I think this strategy is a really good approach for that. It's not the only approach for that, but it's one which I've found success with in the past, and I hope you find it useful. And actually, honestly, my favourite of the three which I've looked at today is Fuller Park. And it's my favourite because it ramps up so quickly to like 40k, but it starts at 9-10k, which is so much less than the other two which were on my top three. Now, the profits don't really start to ramp up until we get about 20 more properties bought in here. But if 20 properties are bought, the floor is going to go up from about 10k to about 15k. That's no joke. And it's such a small neighbourhood that if you do buy there and hold on to it, there's a good chance that it could become quite a valuable neighbourhood anyway, because people like small neighbourhoods. They like to build them up. So I'm probably going to go off and buy some Fuller Park after this video, to be honest, because some of these ones at 9-10k, yeah, it's just like, it's a low risk at that point. Like, grab a couple, and then if over the next couple of weeks a whale spots, oh, actually, there's only like 150 properties for sale in this entire neighborhood. Why don't I just, drop $1 million UPIX and buy everything up to like 20k? And then, he's laughing because suddenly he's made over 200k on that investment just instantly, assuming he can sell it back. So, yeah, those are the kind of plays which the big players like to keep an eye out for. Those are the kind of plays which I'm increasingly keeping an eye out for. And I hope you found this video really useful, and maybe you'll even utilize some of these strategies yourself. I'd love to hear if you have any success doing it. It's obviously a little bit risky, but sometimes Upland is about risk and reward, and certainly if you do your research, the reward can definitely be worth the risk. So if you found that useful, I'd love it if you gave this video a like, and if you want to see similar content to this in the future, feel free to subscribe because it really, really does help me out. But until next time, I'll see you then.